Hello, everyone. It's another episode of the 007 Files, and I'm Bill Koenig, your host for today's installment. And we are going to talk to Jeff Westhoff, who is living the dream. He is not only a Bond fan, he is writing spy novels, and he has one coming out right now. So, Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, I'm Jeffrey Westhoff. I've been a Bond fan since I was 13 years old, so that was 40 some years ago. I've written two books. The first one came out in 2015. It's called The Boy Who Knew Too Much. And if you want to boil that down, kind of the simplest element, it's about a teenage James Bond fan who finds himself in the middle of a James Bond story, although for various reasons, I don't use the name James Bond in the book. The Bond-like character is named Foster Blake. My new book is called From Wonderland With Love, and that is basically Alice in Wonderland as a spy. My two favorite literary characters have always been Alice and James Bond, and my two favorite authors have been Lewis Carroll and Ian Fleming, so I just wanted to see if they were two great tastes that taste great together. I think I pulled it off.
Well, as we record this, you just had a book signing.
I had my launch party.
Launch party, excuse
Yeah, I
me.
haven't had an official book signing yet. There was, due to some weird mix-up with UPS, I did not have enough books on hand at my launch party to sign. So they came yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, that's how it always works
Right.
out. As I said earlier, we'll get into Bond in more detail. But what made you want to do this? Because, Bond fans all dream of various things, but you pulled it off, not once, but twice. So explain the process.
Well, it took, because going back to when I was reading the books as a teenager, I wanted to write spy novels. In fact, I wanted to write a James Bond novel. I actually had something in mind. And then I came up with an idea. This is where the name Foster Blake actually came from. This was the idea I had kicking around in my head when I was a teenager, was to write a spy novel that was basically Ian Fleming and Roger Moore thrown together to go on a spy caper. And so the title I had in mind was called The Other Side of Foster. And instead of James Bond, there was going to be a character named Foster Blake, and there would have been a made-up name for Ian Fleming. Right? But it's just like once I had, there was nothing more to it than that idea.
Okay. Well, your first book, your first novel, The Boy Who Knew Too Much, also evokes Alfred Hitchcock, who, of course,
Yes.
directed not one but two versions of a film called
Right.
The Man Who Knew Who Too Much. So, how much was Hitchcock an influence on your first book?
Hitchcock was a very strong influence. I'm trying to see how quickly I can boil this down. The story of how that came to be. At the time, I've already told you this when I did the interview a few weeks ago, but someone suggested to me, I was writing a story about teenage spy novels, and I was talking to a friend who was an author, and I asked her if she knew anyone who was writing a teenage spy novel, and she misunderstood me. And she said, "You're writing a teenage spy novel?" I go, "No." And she goes, "But you should." And then I was like, yeah, you're right, I should. So I'm like trying to kick around ideas. There's already, Alex Rider was already out there, so there's no reason to try to do a teenage James Bond. And there's like already at least like 4 or 5 different series with spy high schools, and I didn't want to do any of that stuff. So I was trying to come up with something that hadn't been done before, and then it hit me that no one has really done the Hitchcock thing by throwing an innocent kid into a spy plot. And then as soon as I thought Hitchcock, I thought The Boy Who Knew Too Much, and as soon as I knew I knew I was rolling with something there. And then the idea that coming over from the book 6 Days of the Condor, the movies 3 Days of the Condor, the main character was an analyst who read spy novels, and once the CIA turns against him because he's read all these spy novels, he's able to stay ahead of the game. So the idea there is, okay, now I have a teenage spy novel fanatic, and when he gets thrown into a spy plot and the bad guys come after him, he's read enough spy novels that he can stay ahead of the game a little bit. And so it was pretty easy to base that character 99% on me, because as a 15-year-old boy, I was obsessed with James Bond. But I was also reading Quiller novels, and there's a character called Phyllis who kind of never lasted, but I liked his books a lot.
Now, more recently, you're essentially melding Lewis
Hmm.
Carroll and Ian Fleming. Describe how you came up with that idea.
I don't even know how I came up with that idea. It was just, but this was while I was working on The Boy Who Knew Too Much. That idea, the idea of just putting Alice into a spy novel, and as that evolved, I mean, it depends on your familiarity with Lewis Carroll, but those books, his two books, don't really have stories. They're just like a series of every chapter, Alice wanders into a different argument with a different set of strange characters, and it just kind of very episodic, and then she wakes up. Through the Looking Glass has a bit more structure because it's a chess game and Alice is a pawn and she wants to get to the end of the board and become a queen. So still not much of a story, but at least she has a goal. And my challenge to myself, and I think I did it, was can I do that? Can I stick with a structure where it's kind of a series of conversations and arguments, but getting a story out of it? And also from the beginning, it was important to me that that the spy plot be solid and not just, oh, I'm going to say Alice is a spy and then just drop little jokes about her being a spy, but it being like a lame plot. I don't know if you've whenever I see a movie that's like a mix of science fiction and mystery or thriller, it's like the science fiction will be strong, but the mystery will be terrible. I'm thinking of like Minority Report.
Well, I was about to say that for a lot of people, when it comes to Alice in Wonderland, a fair number will remember the Walt Disney feature film cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
But, but the thing about Disney cartoons, I mean, they're great and they're wonderful productions, but they take liberties with the source material. And, so there's a lot more to Alice than Walt Disney.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more to Bambi than Walt Disney, etc. So, how did the full effect of Lewis Carroll come into play for your novel?
My novel, this is really, I treated it as a third book in the series. This is kind of a direct sequel to Through the Looking Glass. Alice is 5 years older, and that is just basically a market thing because if this is a middle grade book, it'll be aimed at readers who are about 10 years old. And in the Lewis Carroll books, Alice is 7, and 10-year-olds don't want to read about 7-year-olds. They want to read about someone older. So I made Alice a little bit older. She's 12 in this book. But
Okay.
but because you can do anything you want in Wonderland, I say that when she gets back to Wonderland, it's only a few weeks later there.
Now, my next question is kind of more of a process thing.
Hmm.
So, is Alice more or less in the public domain, and that
Yes,
enables you? Okay,
yes, yes.
I
I
was
checked.
thinking, I was
Yeah.
thinking that was probably the case, but I
Hmm.
just wanted to nail that down.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how has it gone with the new book? I mean, it's been a few years between The Boy Who Knew Too Much
Hmm.
and the Alice book, and I know you're planning future adventures, spy adventures for Alice.
With Alice,
But
yes.
how is it? Yeah, how is it so far?
I so far, I mean, all I can have to go on is the reviews that have come over on Goodreads, and those have amazed me. I've got, I mean, the book was just published a week ago, and there are already 70 on Goodreads, and
Oh, good.
most of them really love it. It's mostly 5-star and 4-star review with a handful of 3-star reviews, and so far nothing lower than that. So fingers crossed. But
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, okay, you're a big James Bond fan, you're a
hmm,
big Ian Fleming fan, and now you are living the dream of
am I?
getting to do that
Yeah,
at
I
least,
am.
and I think that's great. So, what has been your thought process the last few weeks? Okay, you worked on the book for a while, and now it's out, and people are coming up to you, and I saw some photos you posted
Hmm.
on Facebook. What is that like? I've never done it, so like I want to I want to hear what it's like from someone who has.
It's it's really cool because this has gone pretty well. My publisher, it's a very small publisher. They're called Ringtail Publications, Ringtail Publishing, I believe. They're based out of St. Louis. I am their third book, but this has been handled very well. The publisher is pretty canny about getting the pre-release interviews, getting the readers on NetGalley, and there's another one I forget, and to get the reviews up on Goodreads. And then turned out to be a very good idea. I just reached out to someone at the Lewis Carroll Society of North America and just said, I've got this book coming out. I just want to let people know that if they want to get an advanced copy, they can do it through NetGallery or get in touch with my publisher. And I didn't think that this would lead to getting 70 reviews. And some of them are just like, in my wildest dreams, they're like, the reviews that I would have had in my wildest dreams, but didn't think I would get, like some people saying that it feels like Lewis Carroll wrote this book and something Lewis Carroll would be proud of the book. Handful of people have got the Ian Fleminging, but it's been mostly so far the Alice people. And I think Jack Lugo, who's, of course,
Yes.
he reviewed it. He came at it from the Bond angle, and he got it because there's a lot of Bond in this book too. It's I have Cheshire Cat is M, the Caterpillar is Q.
Well, that's great. So let's switch gears because I know you have been a long time Bond fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll start with something. It was a very thoughtful essay. It's online. You describe how On Her Majesty's Secret Service was not only your favorite James Bond movie, it was your favorite movie, period. So let's start there. What makes Majesty's so special and so different?
Well, what makes it different? Obviously, the obvious answer is George Lazenby. It's his only Bond movie. Also, it's the only one directed by Peter Hunt. So out of that first run of Bond movies going through the end of the Pierce Brosnan era, I'd say it's kind of the only one that has an auteur feeling to it. Now, the Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, now they've kind of let the directors have more free reign than Cubby ever did. I mean, I can try to imagine that if someone told Cubby that for artistic reasons he didn't want to have that gun barrel sequence at the beginning of the movie, Cubby would say, "Okay, next director, please."
Right, right. But
So there's that. But I think,
yeah,
so coming as someone who's also a fan of the Ian Fleming novels, it's the book that feels the most like reading an Ian Fleming novel. It's the movie that feels the most like capturing the sense of reading an Ian Fleming novel.
well, years ago, I wrote a post. Actually, it started as a series of posts for the blog, and then became an article, and expanded to an article. And it was like Fleming content. How do the movies
Mm-hmm.
stack up in terms of amount of Fleming content, the fewest changes? And I argued that On Her Majesty's Secret Service had the most Fleming content, had the fewest changes from Fleming's
Mm-hmm.
original. I mean, they switched the order of some sequences,
Yeah.
but compared to even Dr. No and From Russia with Love, there were like a lot fewer changes. And I know that Peter Hunt very much wanted to
Mm-hmm.
stick as close to the novel as possible. And subsequently, I've seen it's like a table of various drafts. I mean, it was not a given that the
Mm-hmm.
movie would be a faithful adaptation.
I think, because there's some drafts where at the beginning, when Tracy swims out to sea or walks out in the sea, Bond drives his car into the ocean and it turns into a submersible. So it's like
Yes,
an early
yes,
version. Yeah. So you've got and I guess that's when Sean Connery was still in the mix. When
right.
they assumed that Sean Connery was going to do it. And so so already they changed it so it's more of a gadget in the story with the cool gadget stuff instead of sticking close to the original story.
And one thing, it aggravates me personally. I want to get your response to this. So, like, there are like a lot of Bond fans. Oh, if only like Connery had been in
Yeah.
it, and that no talent Lazenby like kick him out. But everybody assumes you would get the same movie except for Connery. But that's not how it would have worked. I
No,
just wonder.
if they had Connery, they would not have hired Diana Rigg.
Exactly. Yeah.
Diana Rigg was hired to, compensate for George Lazenby not having much acting experience. And she is the best Bond woman, and I do not want to see a version of On Her Majesty's Secret Service without Diana Rigg.
Exactly. And there are other things. I mean, one point there was a draft Maybaum did. He even brought up the Goldfinger twin brother thing. Like, yes, he
That was
brought it
already
up.
in that one?
Yes.
Oh, I knew. Okay, okay.
I have this book, The Making of On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
I have it too.
Yeah, so he brought it up then, and then of course
I thought it started with Diamonds Are Forever.
He brought it up again with Diamonds Are Forever. So I mean, that just shows you how different things would have been.
Actually, for whatever reason, Cubby and Harry let Peter Hunt make the movie he wanted to make, which they never gave a director that much freedom before, and after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, they never let it happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, but people say, "Oh yeah, it would have been just the same except Connery had done." Like, no.
And also, the thing is, James Bond needs to be vulnerable in On Her Majesty's Secret Service for that to work. And it's not that I don't think that Sean Connery had the talent to play a vulnerable James Bond, but I think that Connery's Bond from Goldfinger onward was like a Superman. And I doubt an audience would have accepted a vulnerable Sean Connery Bond.
Also, the plan originally was to follow up Goldfinger with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Because in the British print, it says James Bond will be back on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Because that was the best-selling novel at the time.
Right. But then, Broccoli and Saltzman cut the deal with McClory during the British release. So by the time Goldfinger came out it said James Bond will be back in Thunderball. So everything was, it just would have been different. And, again, it just aggravates me when people say, "Oh, it'd been the same." Like, no, it wouldn't have been the same.
And then people, you see this a lot now. Oh, they should have filmed On Her Majesty's Secret Service and You Only Live Twice in order, and then it would have. Well, maybe, but they didn't.
Well, they didn't, and part of the reason was, there's like nature to consider. It's like there wasn't much snow because as late as November of '65, Broccoli and Saltzman were interviewed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and I forget if it was Broccoli or Saltzman. They lay out the schedule, and they say, yeah, in '66 we're going to have On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and in '67 we're going to have You Only Live Twice. But from what I've read, there wasn't much snow that year, so they had to skip over Majesty's and go straight to You Only Live Twice. And of course, their version, You Only Live Twice, had very little to do with the novel.
Right, that was the first one to really depart from Fleming.
Right, but Bond fans, well, they should have done it. Like, guys, there is this thing called Mother Nature, and
continuity was. No one cared about continuity.
No.
Then, I mean, now people are obsessed with it, but no one cared. I mean, they did, at the end of the beginning of From Russia with Love, they say this will be an opportunity to avenge the death of Dr. No.
Right, but it's very much in passing, and they didn't build the whole movie around it.
And there unlike was the Daniel Craig era,
which with Daniel Craig, a lot of it was like retcon.
Yeah,
But anyway, now I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're very thoughtful. I know the answer to this, but I want the audience to hear this. Who's your favorite James Bond actor?
Roger Moore.
And you had a chance to interview him.
I did. When his book, My Word Is My Bond, came out, I was able to interview him. I was a freelance book critic for the Chicago Sun-Times at the time, and so I was able to say, hey, could I interview Roger Moore when he's book? And they said, sure. And I actually got paid extra for that, which was interesting because they said, you interviewed him and you read the book, so we'll pay you extra. And it's like, okay, I would have paid them.
I know he's your favorite Bond, but what was he like to talk to? I mean, I guess it was a phone interview.
It was a phone interview. there was like some line difficulty, and it seemed to be on the end of his hotel, and it was the St. Regis Hotel, which you know I think would not have phone problems. So it's like I was repeating a lot of the questions, not because he was hard of hearing. He was like very sharp, and I think if even if you watch his commentary tracks or listen to the commentary tracks on his movies, the man had a phenomenal memory. And the question I wanted to ask him, if I told myself if I ever interview Roger Moore, this is the question I'm asking: is it's kind of famous that he did not want to film the scene in For Your Eyes Only where he kicks the car off the cliff. He thought that was too vicious for his Bond, but I always thought that scene is actually very similar to Bond dropping Sandor off the roof in The Spy Who Loved Me. So if you didn't have a problem with that scene, why did you have the problem with the For Your Eyes Only scene? And his answer surprised me because I hadn't heard it before, but it made sense when he said it, is that he didn't object to Bond killing Locke. He just thought it was a more clever way to kill him for Bond to drop the pin in the car, and the pin would shift the weight in the car
Just enough.
so the car fell off the cliff. And John Glenn wanted to say, no, kick the car off the cliff. And knowing that, if you watch it, it's actually a combination of those two things happening. He drops the pin in the car starts to shift, and then he kicks the car off.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, and what I'm about to ask is mostly based on anecdotal evidence, but it's not just one or two things, it's years of things. A lot of Americans don't like Roger Moore nearly as much as Sean Connery, the original film Bond. And I know in, the greater Chicago area where you live, there's what I refer as the Chicago Bond Mafia, and they're very, very
Pro
don't
Connery.
care for
Yeah.
Roger Moore. But it's beyond that. When I worked for Bloomberg, and I was waiting, I had this editorial editing position, and we're going to have this conference, and there was this one guy they had hired. He had once been the page one editor of the Wall Street Journal. He had this reputation for being a great editor, and he was. But while we're waiting, somehow got into a conversation about James Bond, and then he said to me, he said, "Well, if we're talking about Roger Moore, I don't think it's really James Bond." And I was dumbstruck by this. And also in 2019, the Producers Guild had a lengthy interview with a writer-producer named Dean Hargrove, and he got in a shot at Roger Moore toward the end of his interview and various things. So it's like it's not just I'm not imagining it.
No, you're not.
This is a thing. So what is it like? Like I said, you're in the midst of that James Bond Chicago mafia. I mean, how did you feel hearing all this?
Well, it was worse because when I was coming of age as a Bond fan, I was 13. I saw The Spy Who Loved Me when I was 13, and The Spy Who Loved Me is the movie that like blew me away and made me a Bond fan. So, and I had seen the first three Sean Connery movies before, and I liked them, but they didn't. Spy Who Loved Me made me want to be Roger Moore. Dr. No did not make me want to be Sean Connery. Sorry. And I'll tell you, because I don't know, I was probably like 10 when I saw Dr. No, and it was on ABC, and my parents were out, and so I had a babysitter with me, and my biggest takeaway from Dr. No was I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world that a woman had a zipper on the back of her towel. And that's probably because I think one of my parents, and I talked to my mother about it the next day. She said, "Well, did you like the movie?" Because I had permission to see Dr. No because my friends wanted to see it. So I had permission to watch another. They told the babysitter I was allowed to watch Dr. No. And I think I was telling my mother, well, this woman, she had a zipper on the back of her towel, and he unzipped her towel. And that's just, who would have a zipper on the back of her towel? That's stupid. And I think that probably guaranteed me not being able to watch James Bond movies for a while. But
yeah.
Well, anyway.
Well,
I will tell you, but so at the time, as you probably remember, the James Bond fan club, the American James Bond fan club at the time, was run by someone who was very anti-Roger Moore. And So to be a Roger Moore fan back in the 1980s, you just felt like you're under assault all the time if you liked Roger Moore, if you liked his movies, because it's all of what little there was at the time, but all the fan press was anti-Roger Moore, and Roger Moore isn't really James Bond. And I remember there's a magazine, like a special magazine that came out when uh, Never Say Never Again came out to celebrate the Second Coming. So they're calling it Second Coming of Sean Connery. And I didn't realize this was racist. This is a little like a racist comment at the time. But someone said, "Would you let your sister date a Roger Moore fan?" Was one of
My.
the I didn't get the racial double meaning to that. But I will tell you one thing that's kind of funny. Pierce Brosnan was doing interviews for I forget the name of it. It wasn't a Bond movie, but it was his first movie that he directed at his own production company. So it was set in a bar in Ireland, but it came out shortly before Die Another Day came out. So it came out in 2002. And so I happened to interview him on my birthday. So that was nice. So he was doing press, but as a round table, there's a few other critics in the room talking to him. And there's one critic who just kind of to get under my skin. So we get to the end of the interview and we're done talking about his movie. He knows the Bond questions are coming. And I think I talked about, because we knew that Die Another Day was the 40th anniversary movie that had a lot of little Easter eggs in it. So I asked him about that. And he said, yes. Oh, yeah, Bond fans will really get all the jokes. And so one of the other critics in the room, just to needle me, because he knew he just like dropped a little, well, at least it's not Moonraker. And I go, look, I know Moonraker is not a good Bond movie. And this was in front of Pierce Brosnan, mind you. And I go, but
Right.
I will go to my grave defending Roger Moore as a great James Bond.
My.
And Pierce Brosnan just goes, quite right. Roger was great.
Well, just so you know where I'm coming from. So
Yeah.
the first movie I saw was Thunderball, and it was at a
Mm-hmm.
drive-in in 1966. It was not immediately after it came out, but it was shortly
Yeah.
after it came out. And it blew me away, and Connery is my guy. But when Connery is like leaving after Diamonds Are Forever, I'm thinking, okay, this is it. It's done. And then someone said, no, there's going to be some more. They said, James Bond is going to be back and Live and Let Die. I said, really? Because I had gotten out of the theater
Yeah. Okay.
and missed that. And then so Roger Moore is going to be this new James Bond. And I knew this story about Lazenby. And then this is great. And was he my favorite James Bond? No, but I was happy. It's like, okay, there's going to be more James Bond movies.
Yeah.
But there are some people, and some of them, we won't name them here, but
Yeah.
there was one time, just get your reaction to this. So there was this email was copied on various people. And then somebody said, that that the Flint movies with James Coburn were more realistic than Moonraker. And okay, that was too much for me. And I called him out and I said, okay, so at what point in Moonraker does Roger Moore talk to a porpoise? And he's going, what are you talking about? I said,
Yeah.
no, you said the Flint movies were more realistic. James Coburn talks to a porpoise. When did you have that? And then he tried to get out of it. Well, that's why he's Flint. No. Answer the question. And he didn't. And I let it go, but
Mm-hmm.
come on, just
Yeah, okay.
anyway.
Okay. First, let me just jump back a bit and defend George Lazenby. Then I'll get back to defending Roger Moore.
Sure.
So the knock against Lazenby is that he couldn't act, which not entirely true. There are definitely scenes in that movie where he looks awkward, but
Yeah.
when you get to the proposal scene in that barn,
Oh yeah.
he is so convincing in that scene, and I'm sure it helped that he was acting against Diana Rigg. Because who else wouldn't want to marry Diana Rigg? But
absolutely.
You have to think that this is the scene. You have James Bond, like the bachelor of the 1960s, the poster boy of the Playboy philosophy, proposing in a very sincere way in a very charming way, and it works. It's a beautiful scene, and it works with Lazenby, and I don't see that scene working with Sean Connery. I don't see it working really with anyone else. But George Lazenby, I think his being new to the character helped to make that scene work.
Well, I saw Majesty's first run in the theater. My mother took me to it. And like I did not know it. And in my house, we watched The Avengers with Diana Rigg.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so when the end of Majesty's comes on, I was dumbstruck.
Yeah.
And when I got home,
does not have a happy ending.
no, and when I got home, my father, who had read a lot of the books, said, "How'd it go?" And like, well, I was distraught. And I'm like, well, that's how it goes. So I don't always get what you want. And like, man, that was. I mean, I was 11 years old when that movie came out. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, the first time I saw that was on ABC, and that was the
Bizarro edit.
Barzar. It wasn't the one that was. It wasn't when it was split up over 2 nights, but so it
Oh,
was all
okay.
in the. But it still had the opening with the narration, and the scenes are all out of order.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but I thought, well, this is weird that they edited it that way. And this, James starts out in the middle of the movie. Then James, those gentlemen in orange,
Right.
Spectre agent's trying to kill me. Let's. This is how it started, and then it would kind of cut back and forth to the ski chase.
Right.
So I just thought it would have been a better movie if they hadn't edited. And I just assumed that's how it was supposed to be. And it wasn't until I went to a James Bond convention in 1981. I was 15. Fiore's only just came out. It was in Chicago. And they showed On Her Majesty's Secret Service there. They showed and I was, that's when it became my favorite movie, because I was just stunned.
Okay.
It's like, oh yeah, this is a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but you wanted to defend Roger Moore a little bit.
Okay, going back
more.
to Roger Moore a little bit. When we get to Live and Let Die, I think Live and Let Die is the 4th consecutive movie with a different actor playing Bond.
Yeah.
And my belief is that if it was so the movie desperately needed stability at that point.
Yeah.
The movies and I believe that if anyone but Roger Moore had come in, that would have been it. That movie would have flopped, and maybe they would have made one more, but it just wouldn't have. It would have run out of gas. I mean, if they had gone with Michael Billington, who was the second choice.
Yeah.
Do you think Michael Billington would have? I mean, no offense to Michael Billington, but
well,
do you think he would have been a huge hit as the character? Maybe he would have been, but I really think I think they needed Roger Moore.
Well, let's run it down, because you had Connery in You Only Live Twice.
Right. Then
you had Lazenby in Majesty's. And then you went back to Connery.
Which was necessary, because I think, if they had gone with Saxon, was it John Saxon?
No, it was John Gavin.
Gavin, okay.
John Gavin had been signed.
Right.
But at United Artists, David Picker in particular, said, we are not going with John Gavin. He wanted to bring Connery back.
Which is a very smart decision.
Right.
Yeah, and then that's saved.
And then you had Roger Moore with Live and Let Die. So you had a lot of tumultuous things going on with the casting of Bond movies in that era. Yeah. So anyway, I'm looking at the time. I guess we should go ahead and wrap this up. But I do want to ask you real quick 2 things. One, where I know you have more novels planned, and 2, what do you think's going on with Bond 26? I mean, none of us really know.
I don't. I think I've just kind of dropped out. It's like, because they're not gonna. You keep seeing the articles. New Bond, they're ready to hire new Bond. It's like, no. First, they have to hire the screenwriter. Then they have to hire the director. Then they hire the new Bond. There's not even talk about them having hired a screenwriter. Maybe they have, but they've always announced it. I would hope that they've got they're looking at some drafts, or they're talking to people, but yeah, so there's like, if they don't even have a screenplay in the works, then we're at least 3 years away. Yeah. And what I've said, and I think this is true, the longer they wait, the more irrelevant James Bond becomes. I don't know if they're counting on once James Bond is back, the whole world will be excited and go, hey, there's a new James Bond movie, let's go. But, and again, and I've said this to you before, Bond has survived as long as he's been around is because he was basically passed on from one generation of teenage boys to the next.
Yes.
You were in the first generation. I was probably in the second generation because I was with Roger.
Right.
I was with Roger Moore, and I saw the younger guys come in with Pierce Brosnan and the video game. But when they went with Daniel Craig, Barbara Broccoli made a conscious decision to not target teenage boys anymore, and Marvel stepped in.
Yes.
And grabbed the teenage boy audience. So I think they've lost, well, probably by now, 2 generations of teenage boys. And, good luck with them trying to, I hope when James Bond comes back, it's a success and people want to see. But, they've decided to make Bond a luxury brand with $3,000 backgammon sets.
6,000 actually. I think that's okay.
Okay, but
6,000 backgammon sets and
$3,000 Octopussy robes, that kind of
yeah. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, Jeff. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it very much, and I'm sure our listeners will. As we record this. This is just before the weekend before Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson are going to get the Irving G. Thalberg Award. There have been predictions. Oh, they might announce something. I'm a little skeptical. I'm actually a lot skeptical.
If they announce anything, they'd announce that they've engaged a screenwriter, maybe.
Right. By the time this episode comes out, we'll know more, maybe. Yeah. But anyway. Thank you again, Jeff.
Okay,
You've been a great guest.
I have to say one more time that From Wonderland with Love is now available at your favorite bookseller. You probably have to order it. I don't know if you're going to find it on a bookshelf, but you should be able to order it anywhere.
And congratulations, Jeff, on your new novel. And
thank you.
Best of success, and we look forward to your future projects.
There's a lot of Easter eggs, and it's mostly an Alice in Wonderland book, but there's a lot of Easter eggs in there that Bond fans will appreciate.
Excellent. Thanks again, and thank you for listening here at the 007 Files. And this has been Bill Koenig, and we'll talk to you soon here at the podcast. Take care.